Joining me now is the former US Navy SEAL, Rob O'Neill, Joseph Scott Morgan, the co-host of the Body Bags podcast, and a scholar of applied forensics at Jacksonville State, and the former CIA agent Mike Baker, host of the President's Daily Brief.
Go to the principal spot, where would I be? And if I was taking a shot at this person, where would I go? It's not this. I mean, we're really talking easy stuff here.
Look, I live in the South. I can tell you the lion's share of people have at least a bolt action in their house, all right, and a shotgun.
It's no wonder that, you disappear into social media and it's a cesspool. It is a sewer system. And that's where this young individual, disappeared into.
Movie, I think, Clear and Present Danger, where they're showing sniper training and they grabbed like a quarter pounder with cheese wrapper. He had lunch here. They were doing that with this dude in Florida. He must have eaten here, and he's like, come on, guys. What, on what planet are you doing security?
What are you going to do? Go door to door and seize all of the weapons? That ain't happening. I can tell you that.
Most of the time, things are pretty much as simple as they seem.
Why did his shirt move the way it did? When I've shot people, their shirts didn't move like that. And then the initial reaction was, well, he was obviously wearing body armor and it was deflection. One, no. He wasn't wearing body armor. And two, it doesn't deflect like that off of body armor. Why was his shirt moving from right to left?
So if this is some kind of grand conspiracy, you would have to get a surgeon on board that had no idea this was coming. And you would have to get the chief medical examiner for the state of Utah to agree to this.
He was obviously dead before he hit the ground, but the questions immediately started to come to me. That was not an entry wound that we saw. We saw an exit wound.
We don't have any data to go on. All we have are the speculative things that are floating about the internet. There are, by the way, not doing anybody any good here.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, we got another Piers Morgan Uncensored coming in for you guys, and today, folks, we're talking conspiracy theories, discussing Charlie Kirk's assassination and all the hoopla surrounding it, right? There's all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories, like, I don't know, Israel did it, or the Groypers did it, far leftists did it. Of course, we know it actually was a left-wing ideology that led to his assassination, but we're talking about like this obscure trans group of assassins that just go around murdering people. It's crazy, folks, and we're going to get into all of these. Some of them are quite wild, like Israel did it as a false flag, or just Israel did it just in general. Like, there's both of those, and neither one of them make any sense, to be honest with you. There's also the Russians did it for some freaking reason. Iran did it. There's all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories out there, and we're going to go over pretty much every single one of them. But before we do that, you guys do me a favor, smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here, because we go over news and politics, and we discuss news articles. We read the news, figure out how we're being manipulated, get the facts, and then go on about our merry way, folks. So y'all do that. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click that join button. It should be like right here somewhere. Sign up and become a member, folks. That is the best way to help this channel expand and grow. And I need y'all's help. I just do. I mean, we need help. We need to stick together. This movement of conservatism in this country, we must unite. We must stay united and help each other out. So y'all do all that for me, and let's just get into it.
Could be 2 football fields 175 yards away from Charlie Kirk, and yet kill him apparently so skillfully with one bullet through his neck. Just from a technical point of view, how difficult is that shot to make?
Good to be with you, Piers. Thanks for having me. That's an easy shot. Even for someone, I mean, they throw the word sniper around almost as much as they throw the word hero around way too often. Anyone with a hunting rifle, a 30-06 like that, that's an easy shot. 200 yards as a sniper, which I am. You pick which nostril you want, and I'll put it in it. So that's easy. The issues, just for me, I mean, it was off right from the beginning for me. Do we not guard rooftops anymore? There's been assassination attempts all over the world. Right. Why aren't we looking at rooftops? And then when I was sent the video with this at the same message where they said Charlie Kirk was just shot. When I watched that horrific video, he was obviously dead before he hit the ground. But the questions immediately started to come to me. That was not an entry wound that we saw. We saw an exit wound. So where'd that bullet come from? You don't bleed like, and I've shot guys closer than the camera was. And an entry wound doesn't look like that. An exit wound does. Why did his shirt move the way it did? When I've shot people, their shirts didn't move like that. And then the initial reaction was, well, he was obviously wearing body armor and it was deflection. One, no. He wasn't wearing body armor. And two, it doesn't deflect like that off of body armor. Why was his shirt moving from right to left? Why were people being interviewed saying, yeah, they came from my left to right, from his right to left, immediately shut down? And then did they tear the crime scene down immediately? Just right off the bat, from seeing it, knowing he was dead, saying a lot of this is bad, not even getting into the soliloquy of text messages that 22-year-olds don't send their trans lover. So immediately, it's just the official story sounds like it needs to be investigated. But now, the whole crime scene is gone. They paved over it. Nothing to see here.
I mean, it's really interesting that you think that, given your extraordinary experience. Obviously, you're the man who shot and killed Osama bin Laden. You're a Navy SEAL for 15 years. You've served in some of the most high-profile missions. So you think that there may well be some substance to some of these conspiracy theories?
I'm just saying, especially in my experience with the bin Laden raid, if you don't see it happen, people are going to say it didn't happen. So unfortunately, we're in a state of affairs where if I'm not there, I'm not going to say it did or didn't happen. I'm just saying what jumps out at me with AI right now, with everything that can be made up. If you don't see it firsthand, you don't know what happened. Videos can be made. Immediately it seemed off to me and plus, as a sniper or a hunter, you don't take a neck shot. You take a neck shot because you missed.
Let me bring in Joseph Scott Morgan. You're a forensics scholar. What do you think of what you just heard there from Rob O'Neill?
Yeah, I think it's a fine assessment. One of the problems is that at this point in time, from a medical legal perspective, we don't have any data to go on. All we have are the speculative things that are floating about the internet. There are, by the way, not doing anybody any good here. We have a surgeon who was hands-on there that treated Charlie, and he even made reference, I believe, he said that Charlie was a Superman man of steel. In other words, what he's saying is the round passed through and it didn't strike anybody else, that the round, he's implying at least, did in fact embed itself in his body. Now, what the status of that round is, I don't know. We don't have an autopsy report yet either, which is a huge problem. If you want to speculate on wound tracks and these sorts of things, and there are people out there that are actually saying that there was not an autopsy performed, even though it is required by Utah state law. The state medical examiner is put into that position where they have to do the autopsy. So if this is some kind of grand conspiracy, you would have to get a surgeon on board that had no idea this was coming, and you would have to get the chief medical examiner for the state of Utah to agree to this, which seems very fanciful at the very least.
The autopsy thing is totally baffling. Why would there not have been one?
Yeah, it's first off, let's stop using the word assassination. That's one of the problems we ran into with Kennedy. From a death investigator's perspective, a forensics guy's perspective, this is a murder investigation. This is a homicide, all right? You politicize it when you say assassination. Let the Utah State Police and let the medical examiner do their job in this particular case. Let them work this case as it is, as a homicide, and draw upon the physical evidence. And the reason we don't have these documents right now is this kid's going to be prosecuted. They're going to take him into court, and they're going to prosecute him, and they're going to seek the death penalty. So don't be shocked if we don't see an autopsy report for some time. And don't be shocked if the Utah State Medical Examiner keeps their mouth shut in here, because there have been other cases where people have run their mouths in advance, and it winds up getting you in far more trouble.
But does your gut tell you, Joseph, that this is most likely to have been the shooter we saw on the roof, who is this 22-year-old who's obviously facing the charges on the death penalty?
Yeah. At this point, I have no other reason to believe that it was someone else, some phantom that may have snuck up behind them, that had popped off some kind of round from some other type of weapon platform that would have been in his rear. It seems to me, and look, I agree with Rob relative to the round. This is a very easy shot. I'm older than most of you guys. I had to qualify with with iron sights at 300 yards in the Army. I'm not a very good shot, but way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, that's even an easy shot with a steel sight. So yeah, I'm not, with a telescopic sight from that range, yeah, I think it'd be a walk in the park.
Hey, I want to address a couple of points made in there. Look, I'm not going to stop Utah State from asking for the death penalty, but I don't believe in the death penalty. I'm a Christian. I don't really think that aligns with the teachings of Jesus. It just doesn't feel right to me, right? Because my whole grievance with the death penalty is the state is issuing the punishment here, and I don't think that is the correct person to issue justice, if you will, right? To me, the only person that has the moral standpoint to dole out that justice would be the victim of the murder, and they can't do that. So I don't think the state, because the state can get things wrong, folks. And we don't want to put somebody to death. We don't want to put an innocent person to death, essentially. That's my whole take on that. But, because that's somebody taking another life, and they're not a victim of anything. But look, I understand a lot of people don't feel that way. That's just how I feel. But let's get into this. Now, he talks about the writings, the text messages back and forth. A lot of people, they did a deep dive on that. It's a deep state conspiracy theory. These are fabricated by the FBI. Well, you know what? Because they don't look real, right? We got to apply Occam's razor, folks. We got to apply Occam's razor. We got to make whatever makes sense. The least amount of assumptions is usually true, if you know what I mean. So what makes more sense here is that this guy just didn't want anybody else to get in trouble, right? That's what it seems like to me. It seems like he just made this up, just typed all this stuff out. Doesn't seem like a real conversation. It seems like it was pre-planned. He didn't want anybody else to go down for what he was about to do, because you're going to get caught, folks, when you do something like this. I mean, he didn't really do everything that he could to not get caught. It kind of doesn't make any sense why none of these people surrounding him would have stopped him, giving a little bit of credence to the conspiracy theory right there. But for the most part, folks, it just really, to me, it seems like he was looking out for his quote-unquote lover, whatever that is. So it kind of seems like these people surrounding Robinson, they had foreknowledge that this was going to happen and did nothing. And personally, I don't think those text messages absolve anybody of anything, and the FBI is definitely looking into all of those. But let's keep going, folks.
When we look at stories like this, I mean, one of the other aspects is that a lot of people come out, particularly on the left, and my views about this issue are well known. I'm not going to legislate those again, mainly because I'm not American. But I think on this one, many people say, well, obviously, if there was more gun restrictions, gun control, these young, unhinged people wouldn't get their hands on weaponry. But it seemed here he just took his grandfather's old rifle. I'm not sure there's any new gun control law you could bring in that could stop that happening. I mean, what do you think of that part of this debate?
No, there's not. What are you going to do? Go to every house and get Papa's old hunting gun? Because that's what this comes down to. We're talking about a Mauser 98 bolt action 30-06 rifle. Look, I live in the South. I can tell you the lion's share of people have at least a bolt action in their house, all right, and a shotgun. And, what are you going to do? Go door to door and seize all of the weapons? That ain't happening. I can tell you that. Yeah. So the idea that this can be some way interdicted, I think is it's an interesting consideration. But on the other hand, we've got an entire generation that's out there that has little or no help for mental health issues. And I think a lot of this goes back to that. You begin to think about the road this guy was on, and I don't personally know him, but I do know that he's disturbed enough, at least at this point, it appears, that he's willing to take out Charlie Kirk in front of hundreds of other people. And by the way, if you just track that round from where he fired from, if he was off just a couple of inches, that round would have been powerful enough to have passed through maybe a couple of people en route. He had a very small window that he was aiming through. If you look at the top of that tarp and then the top of the heads below, That guy had to get that shot off through there. If he had miscalculated in any way, it could have killed other people. So you've got somebody that certainly is not risk averse here. And the big question is, why would that be? Why would this be normalized behavior? Because I got to tell you, it kind of seems like it is sometimes.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Mike, one of the big sort of conspiracy theories raging, Joe Rogan was particularly skeptical about this one, was the role of a guy called George Zinn, somebody who acted irrationally, erratically at the scene and was initially arrested. Let's listen to what Joe said.
This guy was at 9/11. He was at the Boston bombings.
All the hits.
He called in a fake bomb at another place, and then he did this at this thing. Right after, so somehow or another, this guy has the state of mind that the moment someone gets shot, he yells out and says, I did it, and takes his pants down or something like that. I don't know exactly what he did. Then, ready for this? He gets arrested for child porn right away.
Right after this happened?
Oh, right away. He's in jail for child porn. Why is that? Well, now you can't interview him.
So we looked into this. On the bomb threat history, the Associated Press did report on April the 23rd, 2013, that this guy, George Zinn, made a bomb threat at the Utah Marathon shortly after the Boston Marathon. But there's no actual evidence he was also at the Boston Marathon. On the 9/11 suggestion, there's no credible evidence supporting claims that Zinn was present at that either. A lot of these associations seem to have been promoted from pretty crazy accounts on X, not verified reporting. The child pornography arrest did happen. So again, Mike, there's a lot of stuff flying around here, and no one's really sure what to believe. It was a weird moment because I was watching it all at the time. And this guy, George Zinn, is quite well known to people. He's quite notorious. The fact he was there at all just looked very odd. But he seems to have been just a complete red herring. He's nothing to do with this.
Yeah. Look, that goes back to what we talked about before, right? You've got to build, whether you're an individual who's trying to assess the credibility of something you're reading online, whether you're involved in an investigation, you got to build these things on firm ground, right? And again, if you hear something, it gets repeated, someone clicks on it, they send it to their friends. Next thing you know, you got people saying, yeah, this guy's the Zelig of disasters. He's been showing up at every crisis and disaster, for 20 years. And none of it's built on actual information, actual credible, proven information. The only way, look, I go on about this all the time, but the only line of defense to stop some of the nonsense that's out there is the individual. The individual person has to learn how to be somewhat cynical and curious and to take the time, which is difficult because everybody's busy, take the time to look into the credibility of the crap they're reading before they just send it along or repeat it to somebody else. You've got to do this. I will go back to a couple of things that were just said, if I may. This is a mental health crisis. It's not a gun control crisis. So I agree 100%. Our failure in this country is dealing with mental health issues, right? And that's basically at the bottom of all of these recent incidents that we've been seeing. The other thing is, this kid wasn't taking a neck shot. You read these things and go, oh my God, that's a professional shot. This kid got lucky, and nobody wants to think that something this terrible or tragic can happen because his shot, he was probably going center mass or he was going somewhere. He was not saying to himself, I'm going to shoot Charlie Kirk in the neck. And so if you think about the terrible fortune of that happening, nobody wants to think that it's bad luck to create something that causes this much sadness or emotion. It's similar to Kennedy or some of these others where, it lives on because people don't want to think that a world-shattering event could happen because some psycho picks up a gun and gets off a shot.
Now, I have a take on this that a lot of people might not agree with, but I think this line of reasoning right here, well, let's just blame it on mental health. Oh, we've got a mental health crisis in this country, which, we kind of do, but there's no evidence whatsoever that shows that this guy was mentally impaired or he was some crazy lunatic or psychopath or any of these things. As a matter of fact, to the contrary, those fake text messages however you want to take them. I don't think they're fabricated by the FBI. I think the kid made those because he knew he was going to get in trouble. That to me shows that this dude was of sound mind. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't a lunatic, but they kind of touched upon what's going on right here. These people take these deep dives, right? If you ingest nothing but out of context clips from the corporate press and from leftist progressive lunatics, like, once again, let's resort this back to, okay, if you truly believe that Donald Trump is a dictator, this is an authoritarian takeover, fascist regime enacting whatever policies that they want to with complete disregard for the Constitution, how do you deal with that, folks? Seriously, how do you deal with fascists? You can't deal with them at the ballot box. You cannot go and vote a fascist out of office. It just doesn't work that way. So how do you do this, right? Charlie Kirk was one of the main influencers of MAGA, if you will, and he is the one spreading the propaganda, according to these people. How do you deal with that? You got to take them out. We've already seen somebody try to take out Donald Trump, not only twice, but 3 times. A lot of people don't talk about that third attempt because it was obscure and the dude never even got close to a chance, right? It was just some obscure threat. But regardless, people want to take Donald Trump out, right? It doesn't take much with all of the nonsense coming from the mainstream news, with all of their narrative building and all this other nonsense, the psychopathic left claiming ICE is fascists and they're coming after American citizens. It's all lies, folks. But if you believe all of these things, if you're indoctrinated into that ideology and you think that, Donald Trump, they're genociding trans people and you have a trans lover and you're part of the furry community, you think that your people are being genocided. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with genocidal maniacs, folks? You take them out of the game. So he is of sound mind and body to the point, to the extent that he's just buying into the corporate press narrative. That's all it is, folks. I blame most of the bifurcation in this country, right? I'll say 99.9% of the bifurcation in this country is due to the corporate press and how they write up their news articles and how they present news to you, because it's all biased, folks. And the difference is, the bifurcation is the people that will appeal to that authority and just listen to that narrative, if you will, because it's not reality. They'll sprinkle in facts and then cherry pick evidence here and here and here to back up their assertions, right? But a lot of people buy into that. But the people that don't, the people that are like, hang on just a second, some of this doesn't make any sense, or they saw a video clip, they saw the entire context of a video clip and are like, no. And then they point to all this other evidence, or they go and research all this other evidence, what was left out from the corporate press, and realize that the corporate press was lying. That's the bifurcation. People that just appeal to that authority, and others, skeptics, if you will, that are like, no, hang on, something doesn't add up. That's the difference in this country, folks. People are just lazy sometimes, and they don't care. They'll hear something and treat it as the gospel. They'll treat it as the truth and not think twice about being a little bit skeptical to go and fact check this. Are they telling me the truth? Is the corporate press narrative real? Does it align with reality? Folks, I think that's the major difference between, what's going on in this country. Because we look at Democrats and we see that, hang on, like, this is just delusional nonsense, the stuff that they're spouting. Like, men can become pregnant? Like, what are you talking about? And they have been indoctrinated to think this. They have been indoctrinated to think that, there's some sort of spectrum to biology. No, biology is completely binary, folks. You can either be one or two things, aside from, genetic abnormalities. And there are those out there, right? But there's not many. And there should not be an entire culture built around genetic abnormalities, for crying out loud. And that's exactly what they've done. They've deluded themselves to believe that trans people are all over the place, and that, hang on just a second, you're a bigot if you don't believe us. If you do not affirm our delusions, you're a bigot. You're a misogynist, standing up for the patriarchy. I'm sorry, folks. Look, we can either align ourselves with how human history has, or how humans have evolved for thousands of years, or we can align ourselves with delusional nonsense. I don't know which side are you picking? Let's keep going.
There's a lot more answers. Are the text messages between the shooter and his trans boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever you want to call his trans partner, because they just read like almost if you were putting stuff into AI of, how to do text message exchange, it would come out like this, right? It didn't read to me very natural. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 3 adult kids that text me, not every time I'd like them to, but they do, and it never sounds like that. I can't remember the last time my 22-year-old used a comma. My 18-year-old certainly never has. Yeah, it just doesn't work that way. And it's either AI or when I started reading it, other than, no one saying rifle, no one saying my love over and over. My first thought was, this is someone who doesn't speak English as their first language. They're translating it, but it's almost like when it's like sending a dude from South Boston to Georgia and having them fit in. You just sound a little bit different. I can tell you from somewhere else. The texts don't make any sense whatsoever, and the way that they're just put out there, this long dramatic script. That's in a handful of stuff that just doesn't make sense to me anyway. I wasn't there. I need to keep reiterating that. I didn't like that. I don't like the number of tools that you need to take apart 30-06, or how much time you need, how many different tools, and then
well, that's really interesting. So let me stop you there. So if you were doing that with all your training, you were one of the most elite guys in special forces in American history. If you were dismantling this precise rifle, how long would it take you to do it?
A 30-06, well, it's going to take several minutes. I can't even remember I grew up, my first rifle was a 30-06 in Montana, and I can't remember the last time I took it apart. I could take the bolt out, clean that off, but in order to break it down to the point where you can even walk with a limp, it's going to take a solid 5 minutes, I would guess, with different. I don't even think you use that type of a screwdriver that he had with his DNA conveniently all over it, because everything you touch has your DNA on it. It's just taking it apart, putting it together, taking a shot cold bore, by the way, where your scope wasn't on there, taking it back apart, putting it in your pants, climbing down a fence, getting back into the woods, putting it together as you're on the run, wrapping it in a towel, then driving 200 miles away to type to my love the 300 lines of text. It's just none of it makes sense to me. Again, I'm not conspiring with anybody, and I'm not saying it was something that's not. And like Mike was saying, it's usually the most obvious thing that happened is what happened. I wish it never happened, but so many things just don't add up to me.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable, Joseph, for people to ask questions, right? I mean, you don't have to buy into any single conspiracy theory or say that it actually won't end up being exactly, like Mike said, exactly how we think it is, right? And it might be the case. But Charlie Kirk wasn't just any shooting victim. He was the leader of the young conservative Christian right movement in the United States. That carried with it a lot of fame, a lot of infamy, a lot of acclaim, a lot of people that loved him, people that hated him. There's a clear political element to all this, which hasn't fully unraveled yet in terms of exactly how radicalized this shooter was. Did anybody else help him? We don't really know yet, right? There are lots of unanswered questions. I have no problem in this kind of process, particularly with all the disinformation flying around, the obvious stuff that's nonsense, in actually just doing what Rob just did and go, you know what? This might all be completely how it went down. But for someone like Rob O'Neill to say it would take him 5 minutes to do what I think the police had said was done in like a minute or so, that immediately says to me, well, that's a bit odd. It is a bit odd, right? How did this young kid who hasn't been in the military, wasn't a Navy SEAL, didn't kill Osama bin Laden, how has he managed to do all this with such apparent ease and fire one shot that carries out the purpose that he had, which was to murder Charlie Kirk from nearly 200 yards away? He may have just got incredibly lucky, and he might be incredibly quick at dismantling and putting together his granddad's rifle, but it is all a bit odd.
Yeah, it is. I think that one of the interesting aspects of this from an investigative perspective is going back in time and trying to understand if there's anything in his data that's going to indicate when he took notice, I don't know if this is possible, when he took notice that Charlie would be present on campus. Did he go there to that particular area and surveil that area? That's a very specific location. How did he get access to that roof without being seen, and also carrying a long arm up there? Did he disassemble it prior to taking it up there? Did he reassemble it? If you look at that one image that's on the roof, you can see there's like evidence markers up there, and it appears to be, at least, you know, the roof is flat, it's covered with gravel. You can see what it looks like, the outline of an individual that is lying in a prone position. I don't know, maybe that's just convenience. Maybe that's my lying eyes. I have no idea. But when I see that, that's what I'm thinking. And there's going to be a lot of little points of evidentiary value along the way. Here's something else that we really haven't considered. Unlike, you know, if you think about the Zapruder film all those years ago, you had one POV there. I can tell you this. I know that there were a lot of people out there filming this. We have yet to see all of that data from multiple perspectives, all the way around 360 degrees from that specific point at that moment. You know, no one was expecting this. And as the old adage goes, you know, the camera never blinks. When all of that is compiled as well, that's going to be another piece to this that we don't really have a view of at this point in time. You know, and there's any number of cases out there. We're just coming off the Koberger trial right now that we paid attention to for a long time. You know, and we had physical evidence relative to a weapon and blood and all that stuff. But one of the things that really hung this guy was all of the digital data that you can trace back to him, and kind of his movements and all this stuff. I think that a lot of this information is going to be sourced from spectators. You've got everybody out, and that's the nature of things. You know, everybody's got their phone out, they're videotaping or taping, recording. So I think that some of that data is going to come into play here as well.
Okay, so this whole idea that the dude took the gun apart and jumped off the roof and ran into the woods and put it back together, why is that necessary? Look, I understand. That's what the FBI said because they found the screwdriver or whatever on the roof. But it doesn't make any sense. Occam's razor would suggest that he took the shot and that he just jumped off the roof. You look at the video. I've shown the video on this channel. I'm not going to litigate that again. But if you look at the video, it doesn't look like he took the gun apart. Why would he? That doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for him to take the gun apart right there. He's got a towel covering the gun, and he runs off with it. He could be carrying anything, right? Everybody's focus was at the rally at that point in time. Assassination just took place. People are not going to be focused on this guy over here in a parking lot running away for some reason. Like, I don't know why we wouldn't. There's been other questions, you know, like what that guy was talking about. Did he scout the area out? Well, you know, this was known about. We knew Charlie Kirk was going to that event. He put that event together. He was going to be there. Of course, this guy scouted all this nonsense out. He knew he wanted to do this. He knew Charlie Kirk was coming to Utah. Once again, this was pre-planned, folks. It's absolutely pre-planned. You cannot just do this on a whim. I mean, sure, it's possible, but once again, Occam's razor would suggest with everything, with all the evidence that we have, found it in the woods, all that other nonsense, everything that's going on would suggest that this was premeditated, folks. Absolutely premeditated. I don't know why that screwdriver, you know, that screwdriver could possibly be, because we don't have the evidence, could be just some technician was up there working on the AC system and dropped a screwdriver. Why does that have to be Robinson's screwdriver? Once again, folks, we just don't have the evidence to state otherwise because the FBI is building their case. There's a lot of information we don't have that would fill in the blanks on a lot of these issues. But, you know, this idea that, you know, it was Israel, like, none of that makes any sense. That one's quite prevalent. You know, Candace Owens was spreading this one around. Why would Israel do this? Right, there's two different competing theories on that one. That it was a false flag of Israel to gain support, and there's another one that it was Israel did it because Charlie Kirk was starting to question the government of Israel about what's going on in Gaza. Like, why would they take him out for that? There's many other prominent individuals out there that are much more critical of Israel than Charlie Kirk. So either one of those, the false flag, that doesn't make any sense either, because How are you going to gain support by taking out Charlie Kirk, who was actually an advocate for Israel? That would be a dumb maneuver right there. So that theory is out the window. The other one that they took him out because he was criticizing, like, sure, a lot of people criticize Israel, but once again, he was trying to bring folks to the side of Israel. He was advocating on behalf of them. There was absolutely no reason for them to do it. The whole Russia, Iran, China thing, none of that makes any sense. Now, a lot of that theorizing going on with that is they're injecting fake news into the stream of what's already there to sow discord and sow confusion about this whole situation. That could be the case, folks. That could absolutely be the case. I do not see that outside of the realm of possibility. That is definitely a possibility that they could have thrown some information into the mix just to confuse everybody. We just don't know yet. We will never know these answers. At least we will never know until the trial. So we'll get all that information during the trial, during discovery and all that nonsense. So I don't know, man. I don't like to buy into conspiracy theories all that much. There are some things that, you know, any good journalist or anybody out there that's you know, detective, crime investigator, homicide investigators, they must be conspiracy theorists, folks. They've got to put the pieces together, get leads. You know, sometimes you've got to put pieces of evidence together to get ideas of what the shooter or what the suspect, whatever, was thinking. So you can think like that suspect to kind of understand the steps that they took to get from A to B to C to X. Or, you know, wherever you end up. You might end up at the grocery store. You just never know, folks. You know, sometimes you're just driving around and you wake up and you realize that, hang on, you're in a truck stop parking lot and there's a prostitute sitting in your... Never mind. Never mind, folks. Let's keep going.
Like, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? If you think back to the shooter who tried to kill Donald Trump at that open-air event, you know, we know so little about that person. So little. I mean, that could have been one of the most notorious moments in American history. And yet we still know so little. It seemed to be no, like, digital trail, which for a kid of that age seems so, like, early 20s. Really? There's nothing there that's been reported? I mean, again, you know, it's just a bit odd, right? Why do we not know more about that guy?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? You can stack all this up and what Rob said, all those questions. Yeah, and you have to ask all these questions, right? And that's what investigators do that are involved in any case, because, again, you don't take anything off the table until the evidence shows otherwise. But you're right. Look at the Las Vegas shooter at the music festival, right? What do we know about that cat? I mean, so it's not uncommon that oftentimes, you know, you think, well, this is the most earth-shattering thing I've seen, you know, today. And then 2 days later, you know, we're all raccoons chasing the next shiny object. And so we forget. And then, so again, the law enforcement, particularly at the federal level, hasn't seemed to understand this point, that they need to be, in this day and age, with the way that information flows and how people develop ideas and theories and all this, they need to be as transparent as possible. Right? There's some of these things you can't put out there. Like as we just said, the cell phone data, right? We're going to know this kid was sitting up on that roof. That thing would have been pinging, right? So they'll have all that information and they're using that for the case, right? So they're not releasing that. You know, they've got other video footage they're not releasing because they're building this case and they want to make sure that it's airtight. But to the degree they can, you know, and again, they haven't learned this lesson over quite some time, is they need to be more transparent, because the way that information moves from person to person and people develop ideas and they get distrustful of government for these very reasons, there's an obligation on the part of federal law enforcement in particular to be more transparent as possible.
He absolutely hit the nail on the head. You know, there's a lot of distrust in the federal government right now, and there has been for good reason. You know, under Christopher Wray and James Comey and all these people, they were very, very secretive. I mean, we didn't know a lot unless it was a whistleblower came out, you know, about, The FBI sending agents into the Catholic Church, for crying out loud. And, like, none of that made any sense. They were very hush-hush. So the first Donald Trump assassination attempt, look, they kept a tight lid closed on all that information. As we know, they went and cleaned up the crime scene and did not let state investigators go in and do their investigation. They cleaned up the crime scene like lickety-split. Like really, really quick. Like they did not want anybody else to touch that crime scene. That's very, very suspicious right now. But fortunately for the federal government, Kash Patel is one of the most transparent FBI directors we've had in a very, very, very probably ever, to be honest with you. Kash Patel is putting a lot of information out there. He is, washing a lot of dirty laundry, if you will, on, the FBI and past grievances that we've had with the FBI. But, like he said, there's a fine line you got to ride between, securing your investigation essentially and making sure certain information does not leak so you can secure a prosecution against this person, and being transparent as possible, right? There's a very, very fine line. Essentially the way this generally operates is any knowledge that gets out that's already public because it was, a really high-profile assassination or murder, whatever you want to call it, homicide that took place in a very public space on camera, all that information that we can see, they must release that to be transparent. But anything else, they're probably not going to want to release, like all the cell phone data and all this other nonsense that we just don't even know about, stuff we wouldn't even think to know, that would actually answer a lot of questions, that would actually rule out the fact that Israel was involved, things of that nature, right? Rule out the fact that Groypers were involved, right? That was a whole fascinating theory right there within itself. It's really, really interesting when the ADL and Nick Fuentes are saying the exact same thing. Don't you guys find that fascinating as hell? Let me know down in the comments, because even Nick Fuentes was like, this is going way too far, guys. Come on, we need to chill the F out. Nick Fuentes, of all people. God, those Groypers, they're just the worst, aren't they? Like some of these people, like the people that follow Nick Fuentes are just some of the worst people in the world, I believe. Like they go around, I think that's the source of a lot of death threats that are coming from the right. Seriously. Like I don't understand this group of people that go around and give out all these death threats to all these prominent individuals and lawmakers and all this other nonsense. Like, what are you doing? What does that help? What are you doing here? Like, none of that is assisting anything. You're only sowing destruction in your path, right? Like destruction in the wake of whatever you just did. And it's stupid. It's very stupid. And it does not promote anything good. It only promotes evil. And I just don't get that. I don't understand it at all. I don't think I ever will. Never have. This is all crazy, folks. This is all crazy. Maybe we'll get some of these answers one day. Maybe we won't. But look, we've got to be skeptical of the corporate press narrative. We need to look into what they're saying and fact check what they're saying. That is the best thing about the internet right now, is that we can actually go and look up facts and get good sourced facts for a lot of this information that's being put out by the corporate press. Because just about everything, folks, and I always say this in my regular videos, that the narrative from the corporate press is there's always an underlying narrative that Republicans are evil and Democrats are the good guys. Democrats are angels, Republicans are devils. That's always the narrative. So whenever you read some of these corporate press news articles, or you click on CNN or MSNBC, keep that in the back of your mind, that they're trying to sow a narrative that Republicans are bad. Look up some of these facts. Go and fact check this stuff, right? There's a lot of fact checking organizations out there. There's left aligned, there's right aligned, there's hardly any center aligned fact checking organizations. Most of them claim to be centrist, but most of them are aligned with one side or the other. So you got to be wary. And this is why I always, whenever I read news articles, I generally cover Associated Press news articles for one specific reason. Because at the very least, at the end of the article, they'll at least give you the facts. They'll skew it in whatever way they want to try to portray whatever narrative they want to. But when you read something, you can extrapolate what actually took place from what you're reading, even though they're trying to make you think it's the opposite of what you're reading. It's very fascinating. But when I do these news article videos, right, I always, if possible, I will always read the Associated Press. They're supposed to be centrist, but they're left. I'll read a far leftist news website article of it, and I'll also read a right-wing publication, right? So I can get a good blend of everything. And then I take all of that. I will fact-check a lot of the certain situations that I can fact-check, whatever took place, whatever we're talking about. You know, I'll cross-reference that with whatever I need to. A lot of times, I'll go to the White House website, see what they posted, get some information from there, because generally they're going to give you their side of the story. And most of the time, folks, there's a lot of facts that are given out from the White House that are left out of news because it's not pertinent to the news story, but it adds to the context of the bigger story, if you will. So we got to stay on top of these things. It's a shame that we must do these things, that we must do legwork just to get news. I don't think that should be the case, folks. I think there should be a one-stop shop you should go to get just the facts. No ideology, no bluster, no filibuster, just facts. And that's it. There's a couple of websites. Just the News is pretty good, folks. If you are looking for news to read and you want just the facts, for the most part, right? I would say 95% of Just the news articles are just the facts, pretty much. Just what happened, and that's it. There's no bluster. There's no filibustering. There's no partisanship. None of that nonsense. I mean, sometimes it kind of falls to either side. That's the 5%. They may give you a little bit this way or the other way. But it is what it is, folks. If they give you a quote from a Democrat, they will directly back that up with a quote from a Republican in the opposing view. If they do go partisan, they will give you both sides. That's what I love about them. SAN, that news publication, is also very, very good. Straight Arrow News. They're pretty good too. So that's two websites you guys can go to if y'all need news. Or you can come to me, right? I cover these news articles. I do all the legwork. I do the research. And people still say I'm lying. But, you know, it is what it is. You got groypers out there on both sides. As a matter of fact, folks. But I think I've rambled on for long enough. Hopefully we've dispelled some of these conspiracy theories. In case you were buying into some of them, you know, most of them don't make any sense. But, you know, it is what it is. Always apply Occam's razor to just about everything, folks. Just about everything. Occam's razor can be applied, and it's applicable. I know that was a double negative or double positive. Redundant. There you go. Redundancy. I love it. I love it. But you guys do me a favor and let me know what you think about all of this down in the comment section. Don't forget to smash that like button for me. It really, really helps the channel out, and I definitely need y'all's help, folks. Spread the word. Y'all subscribe and do all that goobly gobbly stuff. Click the join button and all that good stuff. So you guys remember out there that God has a plan for everybody. You may not know what that plan is. You may not like that plan all that much, but there is a plan for everybody, and God loves each and every one of you out there. So you guys remember that. Try to have a good day and stay legitical. Peace.